My name is Barbara Mullins, 15 years old. I used to think childhood was something steady like a long hallway. You walk down without realizing how far you've gone or how much the walls have changed around you. But looking back now, it feels more like a series of doors slammed shut behind me, each one echoing louder than the last. The first slam happened when my mom left. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. No long speeches, no dramatic goodbye, just a quiet, shaky-voiced explanation to my dad about needing space. And then she walked out of our lives. Or at least that's the version I was told. My dad, whose voice always sounded more convincing than truthful, stood in the kitchen afterward and said he'd fight for me. He claimed it was for my own good, that I needed stability and that my mom couldn't be trusted to provide it. I didn't question him then. I didn't know enough to even try. So I stayed, and my mom didn't come back. In those early years, things weren't perfect, but they were ours. Dad would pick me up from school, and we'd sit in the car eating soft-serve ice cream even in chilly weather. He wasn't warm in the way some dads are, never the type for long hugs or emotional conversations, but he was predictable, present, dependable in the small ways that mattered to a kid. We had our routines: Friday card games, Saturday errands, Sunday pancakes. Simple, quiet things. And then one day he brought Haley home. He described her like she was some miracle, a woman who understood him, who brought out the best in him, who needed a strong man in her life. I was too young to understand what that meant. I only knew that when Haley walked into our living room for the first time wearing perfume that smelled too sweet and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, my dad seemed to straighten his spine like he needed to impress her. 4 months later, they were married. Haley came with 2 daughters, Mia, 13, and Ava, 11. I didn't resent them at first. I didn't know them. But I noticed immediately that their arrival shifted something in the air. Suddenly, the quiet little life Dad and I had built was drowned out by their laughter, their complaints, their music, their arguments. And my dad, who used to save the last scoop of vanilla for me, became obsessed with proving he was the perfect stepfather. He bragged endlessly about Mia's grades, Ava's talent, their supposed hardships, their absent father. How lucky they were to have him, how much they needed him, how he was going to fix everything for them. Meanwhile, I was still there, moving through the house like a shadow he occasionally remembered existed. The little rituals we'd once shared disappeared overnight. No more card games, no more afternoon ice cream, no more weekends, just him and me. He explained it with a shrug and a casual, "We're a bigger family now, Barbara. You have to learn to share. Share what my dad, my home, my sense of belonging." But I didn't argue. I really tried to make things work. Haley, for her part, didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't act like the stereotypical evil stepmother. No, she was subtle. She excluded me carefully, like her cruelty was something she was measuring with a syringe. Family movie nights happened without me. Shopping trips, dinners out. I'd hear them laughing in the living room while I sat in my room doing homework I finished hours ago. If I asked about it, she'd tilt her head and say something like, "Oh, Barbara, I thought you were busy. You always look so occupied." The way she said occupied made me feel like she meant unwanted. But what really hurt was Dad's reaction, or rather lack of one. He never questioned Haley, never defended me. Whenever I tried to explain how she treated me differently, he dismissed me with lines like, "You're being dramatic," or "Haley's trying her best," or the one that stung the most, "Stop making everything about you." Meanwhile, Mia and Ava could do anything and get away with it. They left their shoes everywhere. They talked back. They broke things, including my phone charger, and Haley brushed it off with a laugh, saying, "They're still adjusting." When I did something half as minor, Haley made it a teachable moment, a lecture, a reminder of how things were done properly. And Dad always took her side. I tried to stay out of their way. I stopped asking for things. I stopped expecting fairness. I shrank myself so small I sometimes wondered if that's why no one saw me. I thought that was rock bottom, but I was very wrong. One evening, Haley cooked shrimp stir-fry. The kitchen smelled so strongly of shellfish that just breathing too deeply made my throat tighten. I reminded her politely that I had a severe allergy. She sighed dramatically and handed me a plate of noodles she had cooked separately. Except the noodles smelled faintly like shrimp, and the moment I lifted the fork, I felt something was wrong. I asked if she'd used the same pan. She rolled her eyes. I rinsed it. "You're so picky." Picky, not allergic, not at risk, just inconvenient. I refused the food, and right then, my dad walked in. Before I could say a word, Haley stepped in front of me and said I made her something special and she's refusing to eat it. Special, as if poisoning me was an act of love. Dad didn't ask questions. He didn't even look at the plate. He just lectured me about gratitude while Haley watched from behind him with a tiny, satisfied smile. That night I went to bed hungry. The next morning I used a towel Haley had washed, and within minutes my skin was covered in Hive's big, angry red welts that burned to the touch. I looked at myself in the mirror, horrified, scratching, until tears stung my eyes. When I confronted Haley, she casually mentioned she'd tried a new detergent because it was on sale. Dad finally looked alarmed. For a brief moment, a flicker, he seemed like the old dad, the one who cared if I was hurting. He apologized. He promised he would talk to Haley. He even said he'd buy hypoallergenic detergent for me. And then in a sudden burst of guilt or shame or something I couldn't name, he said he wanted to make it up to me. Just the two of us. A weekend trip. I could choose where. He sounded sincere enough that for the first time in months, a fragile spark of hope lit inside me. I suggested Portland. He agreed instantly. For the next few days, I clung to the delicate possibility that maybe things could get better. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. I packed carefully. I planned outfits, places I wanted to see, conversations I hoped we'd finally have. But deep down, beneath the thin layer of hope, something gnawed at me, a quiet fear I tried to ignore. Because something about the way Haley watched us pack, something about the way Mia smirked when she walked past my room, something about Dad's forced cheeriness. It all felt wrong. I should have listened to that feeling. It was the first whisper of the disaster waiting for me in Portland. The morning we left for Portland, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, actual excitement. It was small and fragile, like a soap bubble balancing in my chest, but it was real. Dad was upbeat as we packed the car. He hummed along to the radio, tossed my suitcase in the trunk, and asked if I wanted to choose the playlist for the drive. It felt oddly familiar, almost like the version of him I used to know had resurfaced. I tried not to read too deeply into it, but hope kept nudging at me anyway, whispering that maybe, just maybe this weekend could change things. The drive started off fine, peaceful even. Dad asked about school, what books I'd been reading, whether I was still into watercolor painting. I answered carefully, not wanting to ruin the fragile atmosphere. The trees blurred past the windows, the sky was clear, and for the first time in months, the tension curling around my ribs loosened. But that feeling didn't survive long. The moment we pulled into the driveway of the Airbnb, everything shifted. Dad parked the car, and as I stepped out, another vehicle turned in behind us, a silver SUV I knew too well. My heart dropped into my stomach, cold and heavy. The driver's side door opened, and there she was, Haley. Behind her, Mia and Ava spilled out laughing and talking over each other like this was a planned vacation for all of us. I stared. My hands went numb. Dad avoided my eyes. Surprise, he said softly, as if this was some thoughtful gesture. I thought it'd be nice to make this a family trip. Family trip. Those two words sliced through me. This was supposed to be our trip. He said so. He'd promised. Haley strutted over, sunglasses perched on her head, acting like she owned the place. "Isn't this spot adorable?" she chirped, looking at the house, not at me. Perfect for a weekend getaway. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. Inside the Airbnb was cozy, open living room. Warm lighting. A kitchen stocked with little labeled jars of spices. It should have felt welcoming, but with Haley's perfume filling the air and Mia's voice echoing down the hallway, it felt suffocating. There were 2 bedrooms, one for Dad and Haley. The other had bunk beds for the 3 of us girls. I didn't complain. I just climbed to the top bunk in silence, pressing my nails into my palms to keep from crying. I'd learned long ago that crying in front of them didn't make things better. It only gave them something to talk about later. That night, Dad announced we were going out for dinner. I tried to stay hopeful. Maybe we'd go somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. "We're going to that seafood place nearby," Haley said before Dad could answer. "I saw it on Yelp. 5 stars. Seafood. Of course." I reminded them gently about my allergy. "Can we go somewhere else? Just tonight?" Dad sighed, already annoyed. "Barbara, you can order something safe. It's just 1 meal. 1 meal to them. A potentially fatal risk to me." But I didn't argue. I knew better. The moment we walked into the restaurant, the smell hit me. Shrimp, crab, lobster, thick and oppressive. It wrapped around me like a choking fog. I could feel my throat tighten instinctively, my skin already prickling, even though I hadn't eaten anything yet. At the table, the menu confirmed my fears. Every dish had some kind of shellfish involvement. Even the salads were topped with shrimp or tossed in seafood-based dressings. The only thing I could safely eat was plain white rice. So that's what I ordered. While Haley and the girls feasted on seafood towers, crab legs, dipping sauces, and grilled shrimp skewers, I sat there poking my bowl of rice, trying to ignore the smell and the ache in my chest. Haley made a show of savoring everything. "Oh, this is amazing," she said loudly, waving a buttery shrimp tail in the air. "Barbara, you sure you don't want to try at least one bite? Live a little." Mia and Ava giggled. Dad didn't look at me once. That night I barely slept. I lay on the top bunk staring at the ceiling while Mia whispered to her sister below, complaining about the hike Dad had planned for me tomorrow. They didn't want to go. They weren't shy about saying so. I knew that meant something bad for me, and I was right. In the morning, I woke up early and got dressed, excited for the one thing I'd actually looked forward to, a park with hiking trails and a famous garden I'd always wanted to see. I told Dad again that this was important to me. He nodded, but he seemed distracted already, glancing toward Haley as if waiting for her approval. We drove to the park. It was beautiful sunlight filtering through tall trees, cool air birds calling in the distance. For a moment, I felt lighter. Then Mia complained that it was too hot. Ava said her feet hurt. Haley pretended to fan herself dramatically. "Oh, Logan, this is too much for the girls," she said. "Maybe we should do something more relaxing." Dad nodded, quickly, too quickly. "We won't stay long," he said, turning to me. "Maybe an hour." An hour wasn't enough to enjoy even a fraction of the park, but I swallowed my disappointment and smiled stiffly. We walked for 10 minutes before the complaints intensified. "I'm bored. This is stupid. Can we go shopping instead?" Dad kept glancing between them and me, guilt pushing on his expression, the way wind pushes on a door that's about to break open. Finally, he caved. "We're leaving," he said. I stopped on the trail. "Dad, can I stay?" "Just for a couple of hours. You can pick me up later." Before he could answer, Haley jumped in. "Absolutely not. You can't expect us to drive back and forth just for you. It's irresponsible." Irresponsible, because wanting to walk in a park was somehow reckless. Dad nodded, as if her logic made perfect sense. And so we left. They went to the mall where Mia and Ava darted from store to store, squealing over expensive clothes, while Dad carried their bags. I walked behind them in silence until I spotted a bookstore and quietly slipped away. I spent 15 minutes losing myself among shelves of novels and poetry collections, letting the words blur the ache inside me. By the time I returned, Haley was clutching her chest dramatically. "Where were you?" she demanded. We were worried. She wasn't. She was annoyed I hadn't stood still where she wanted me. Dad apologized to her, and told me to be more thoughtful. That night at the Airbnb, I overheard Haley whispering to him in the hallway. "She ruins everything," she hissed. "This trip was supposed to be for all of us, but she's making it miserable." Dad sighed heavily. "I know. I'm trying." I lay in my bunk blanket, pulled to my chin, tears blurring the wooden slats above me. I'd never felt so alone. But nothing prepared me for what came next. The mall wasn't the worst part. The worst part was being abandoned. The moment I realized the SUV wasn't coming back. The moment I saw my own father, driving south toward home without me. The moment I understood that hope was a trap, and I had walked right into it. When the police escorted me onto the plane headed back home, I felt like I was floating somewhere outside my own body. Everything around me, the airport announcements, the shuffle of passengers finding their seats, the quiet hum of the aircraft felt distant, like I was underwater, and the world above the surface kept moving without me. I clutched the bracelet I bought at the mall so tightly my fingers ached. It was the only thing I had from the trip that hadn't hurt me, the only thing that felt like mine. When I landed, my mom was waiting just past security. The moment our eyes met, something inside me cracked. She rushed forward, and I melted into her arms. I didn't cry loudly or dramatically, no sobbing, no shaking. It was a quiet kind of crying, the exhausted kind that slips out because you've used up everything else. She held me tighter than she ever had, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time someone hugged me like they actually cared. The car ride to her place was quiet, but not an uncomfortable quiet. She didn't press me for details. She didn't lecture. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just kept glancing at me, her eyes soft, her jaw tense with something that wasn't anger at me, but at what had been done to me. That alone felt like a kind of healing. Her house was small but warm, decorated with framed photos, plants, and mismatched mugs. It smelled like lavender and laundry detergent, gentle detergent, safe detergent. I didn't realize how tense my shoulders had been until they finally loosened. For the first couple of days, she didn't bring up the trip at all. She made me tea, cooked meals I actually liked, let me sleep in, and gave me space. And that was when the emotions started catching up. They didn't come all at once. They came in waves, messy and unpredictable. Anger, betrayal, confusion, relief, shame that I'd believed for so long that the problem was me. One night after dinner, I finally told her everything. About the dinner at the seafood restaurant, the park, the mall, the moment I realized Dad had left me behind. She listened without interrupting. By the time I finished, her eyes were glistening. "That should have never happened to you," she whispered. "None of it." We sat in silence for a long while, and then she told me her side of the story, one I'd never heard before. She began with the divorce. According to Dad, she left because she needed space. According to her, that wasn't even close to the truth. She wanted joint custody. She wanted to still be in my life. She wanted me to have both parents, but Dad fought viciously for full custody. She said he painted her as unreliable, irresponsible, downright dangerous. The incident he used to win his case was something I only remembered in fragments, me getting sick after eating an expired snack. I remembered the pain, the nausea, the long night throwing up. What I didn't remember was the truth. Dad had been the one who gave me the expired food. He knew it was his fault, my mom said quietly, her voice trembling. He told me to keep it quiet, so his family wouldn't make a big deal. And like a fool, I agreed. I didn't want more drama. I thought we were doing what was best for you. Her face hardened, grief twisting into something bitter. I never imagined he'd twist that same incident to accuse me of neglect. I felt sick, not because of the memory itself, but because of how deeply he had manipulated both of us. I had spent years thinking my mom didn't fight for me, years thinking she chose to walk away, years resenting her while trusting the person who had lied. She took a breath. "I still tried to stay in your life. I called, I wrote, I showed up, and every time he made me feel like an intruder." I remembered the awkward visits, the stiff conversations, the way Dad always hovered like he was waiting for her to mess up. At the time, I thought he was protecting me. Now I realized he was performing. I felt tears prick my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to put you in the middle," she said gently. "I didn't want you to feel like you had to choose." But I had chosen. I'd just chosen wrong. Over the next few days, she told me more things she'd kept buried because she didn't want to hurt me. I learned that Lena, my grandmother, had been cut out of my life because she questioned Dad's relationship with Haley early on. According to my mom, Lena had said Haley felt too comfortable around him long before they openly started dating. She didn't like how quickly he began depending on Haley for emotional support. She didn't trust Haley's intentions. Dad didn't take criticism well, so instead of listening, he cut Lena off. Hearing all this made my chest feel tight with a grief I didn't have a name for. Grief for the years I'd lost, the family I could have had, the version of myself I might have grown into if the adults in my life had chosen honesty instead of pride. My mom encouraged me to call Lena. "She misses you," she said. "She's always missed you." So I did. When Lena answered the phone, her voice cracked. Before I even said who it was, Barbara. She whispered, breathless, "Is it really you?" We talked for hours. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She confirmed everything my mom said. She apologized for not fighting harder. She cried when I told her what happened in Portland. And then she told me something that changed how I viewed everything that had happened. "Haley wasn't some stranger," she said. "She and your father worked together for years. I think she saw an opportunity. And your father was too insecure, too eager to prove himself to see what she was doing. It made too much sense. Haley's immediate control of the household, her need to isolate Dad, her disdain for me, her hyper-focus on appearances, her manipulative sweetness. And Dad, he was always more afraid of looking like a failure than being one." After that call, Lena insisted we meet in person. When I saw her, it felt like seeing a piece of my childhood I'd forgotten I had. She hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe for a moment, and yet I didn't want her to let go. We sat on her couch sipping tea while she told me stories about when I was younger, stories Dad never mentioned, or maybe never cared to remember. And as she talked, something inside me shifted. Something old and heavy finally loosened. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt wanted, protected, seen. All of this. The truth about the divorce, the custody battle, Haley's involvement, the isolation. It painted a picture of a man I realized I didn't know anymore, or maybe one I never truly knew. The father who taught me card games and bought me ice cream felt like a memory from a life I didn't live. The real man was someone else entirely. A man who had chosen a woman over his daughter. A man who lied, manipulated, and abandoned. A man who had no business raising a child. One evening, after all these revelations had settled uncomfortably inside me, my mom sat beside me on the couch. "What do you want to do, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "About your father, about everything." I thought about her question for a long time, long enough that the sun had dipped below the horizon and the room glowed, only with warm orange lamplight. "I want him to know what he did," I finally said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't crack. It was steady even. "Sure. I want him to answer for it." My mom nodded slowly, relief and pride flickering across her face. "Then we'll do it together," she said. And for the first time, I believed her. My mom, Lena, and I spent the next few days preparing, though. Preparing feels like too calm a word for what was really happening inside me. I wasn't getting ready for a simple conversation. I was getting ready to rip open years of buried wounds in front of people who had no idea how deep they went. Every time I imagined standing in front of my dad, my stomach twisted. Every time I pictured Haley's face smug and unbothered, something hot flickered through me, equal parts anger and fear. But beneath all that, something steadier grew resolve. I wasn't just confronting him for myself. I was confronting him for the girl I used to be. The girl who thought her father's love was conditional, who believed she was hard to love, who convinced herself the problem was her. I was doing this for the girl who waited in a mall for a father who was already halfway down the highway. The opportunity came faster than I expected. My uncle, the only one in Dad's family I vaguely remembered being kind to me, was hosting a backyard gathering. A birthday, a cookout, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Dad, Haley, and her daughters would be there. "This is it," Lena said firmly as we drove over. "He won't be able to twist the story in front of everyone." Mom squeezed my hand. "We're right here with you." I nodded, but my heart was pounding so loudly it felt like my whole chest shook with each beat. When we stepped into the backyard, everything paused for a fraction of a second. Kids running around, adults chatting near the grill, music humming from a speaker, the smell of barbecue thick in the air. It all froze the moment people realized who had just walked in. Dad spotted us and went pale. Not shocked, more like caught. Haley's face twisted into confusion, then irritation. Mia and Ava shrank back, slightly uncomfortable but unwilling to leave their mother's side. "Barbara," Dad said as he walked toward me, forcing a shaky smile. "What are you doing here?" There was no warmth in his voice, no relief, no remorse, only fear of what I might say. "We need to talk," I said loud enough for the people nearest us to hear. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Dad glanced nervously at the watching crowd and tried to shepherd me away. "Let's go somewhere private, honey." "No," I said, stepping back. "We're doing this here." Haley's eyebrows shot up. "Here," she echoed like the thought offended her. I ignored her. My legs felt shaky, but once I began talking, the words came out like a storm finally breaking open. I told them everything. The Portland trip, the Airbnb, how Dad promised a weekend for us but brought Haley and her daughters along, the restaurant where I ate nothing but rice while they devoured seafood, the park they ruined, the mall, the waiting, the calls, the panic. The moment mall security realized I'd been abandoned. The police. Finding Dad's location through Find My iPhone. Watching the little dot move farther and farther away, knowing he wasn't coming back. As I spoke, the backyard went silent. Not even the kids made noise. Not even the wind rustled the trees. It was the kind of silence that feels sharp, heavy, dangerous. When I finished, Dad's face was red, not with shame, but with defensiveness. "This is all blown out of proportion," he said quickly. "I thought you were with Haley. We didn't realize." "You didn't realize I cut in. Dad, the police called you. They left voicemails. They tried to track you down. You ignored every single call." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Haley stepped forward, folding her arms. "You're exaggerating. We weren't that far away, and it's not like we meant to leave you behind." Madison weighs... "It's Barbara," I snapped. She blinked, thrown off that I corrected her. I continued. "You meant to leave me behind. You told my dad I was ruining the trip." Haley's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Well, you were making it difficult for everyone." A gasp rippled through the group. My uncle stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Difficult," he repeated slowly. "She's 15 years old." Haley's cheeks flushed, but she pressed on, trying to salvage her image. "Look, we thought some space would help." She was being dramatic. Dramatic. My voice rose sharply. for not wanting to be dragged to a seafood restaurant that could literally kill me. Haley flinched. Dad stepped in, voice cracking with desperate frustration. Everyone calm down. You don't understand the stress I've been under, raising Barbara alone, dealing with the divorce, trying to make a new family work. No, Lena said suddenly. The entire yard turned to look at her. My grandmother stepped forward with a commanding presence that made even the kids freeze. Logan. She said, her voice low and shaking with emotion. You don't get to make excuses for abandoning your daughter in another state. Dad swallowed. Mom, please. No, she repeated louder this time. I warned you about Haley. I warned you about pushing your daughter aside. But you refused to listen. You chose a woman who controlled you over the child who loved you. Dad tried to speak, but Lena wasn't finished. She could have died, she said, pointing at me. Her allergies, her safety, her well-being, none of that mattered to you. Dad's shoulders slumped. Haley stepped forward again, defensive. This is unfair. You're all ganging up on us. But someone else chimed in, another aunt, then an uncle, then even a cousin I barely remembered. People who had seen small signs but never understood the full picture. People who were horrified now that the truth had burst open in front of them like a flood. Haley's composure cracked. She grabbed her purse with a trembling hand. We're leaving, she muttered. Mia and Ava hesitated, looking at each other, but followed her quietly. Dad looked like he didn't know whether to chase after them or stay. In the end, he stayed frozen, caught between guilt and pride, between the truth and the lie he'd built his life around. No one spoke to him. Not a single person. As my mom, Lena, and I walked away, I felt the weight of the past pressing against me, years of hurt, years of confusion, years of shrinking into myself. But underneath it, something else grew. For the first time, I wasn't the one who was invisible. For the first time, I wasn't the only one who knew the truth. And for the first time, I wasn't walking alone. In the days after the confrontation, life felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I kept waiting for something dramatic to happen next, for Dad to show up at my mom's door, for Haley to call and scream at me for some explosion of rage or manipulation. But none of that happened. Silence can be peaceful, but it can also be terrifying. Because silence gives you space to think, and thinking is dangerous when you've been holding everything in for years. For the first time, the weight of what had happened, what really happened, settled over me. The abandonment, the favoritism, the lies, the way my father twisted the world until I didn't trust my own feelings anymore. I spent long nights awake replaying moments from my childhood, seeing them through new eyes. Things that once seemed normal now looked like red flags screaming for attention. The way he cut my mom out, the way he pushed Lena away, the way he placed every expectation on me and none on himself. And worst of all, the way he replaced me the second Haley and her daughters walked into his life. One morning at the kitchen table, my mom slid a folder across to me. I've spoken to an attorney, she said gently. If we want to take legal action, we can. My stomach tightened. Part of me didn't want to do it, not because I thought Dad deserved mercy, but because I worried it would make me cruel. I worried people would think I was being dramatic or vengeful. Years of conditioning had taught me to minimize my own pain. But another part of me, stronger now, knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about safety. It was about making sure he couldn't hurt me again. We'll do it, I said quietly. Mom reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes soft with sadness, but firm with resolve. I'm proud of you. So we began. The legal process was everything I feared. Slow, invasive, exhausting. I had to repeat my story over and over, first to the lawyer, then to an investigator, then in written statements. Each time I felt like I was peeling back another layer of a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. There were nights when I had to step outside the house just to breathe. Nights when the memories felt too heavy to carry. Nights when Mom found me curled up on the couch and held me while I cried. But every time I told my story, it got a little easier. I stopped hearing Dad's voice in my head telling me I was overreacting. I stopped doubting myself. We handed over everything. The voicemails from the police, the tracking map from Find My iPhone, screenshots of conversations, medical documents about my allergy, even old texts from Haley proving how she felt about me. It all built a case stronger than I had expected. When court day came, my heart hammered in my chest like it was trying to escape. Dad sat on one side of the room with his attorney Haley, on another with hers. Neither of them looked at me. Neither of them tried to apologize. Dad looked angry that he was being held accountable, angry that the story he manufactured for years was crumbling in public, angry that his daughter didn't recoil under his glare the way she used to. Haley looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow tightness around her mouth. But even then, she never once admitted guilt, not even a whisper. Their lawyers tried to twist things, tried to make it look like a misunderstanding, a lapse in communication, a misinterpretation. They tried to paint me as emotional, traumatized, confused, overreacting. It didn't work. The evidence spoke louder than any lie. When the judge read the verdict, the room felt still. My father, 18 months in prison for child neglect and abandonment, followed by 3 years of probation, mandatory parenting courses, mandatory counseling. Haley, 6 months in jail for negligence and endangerment, a fine and community service specifically in child welfare. Both of them financial compensation for emotional damages. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It didn't magically erase what they did. It didn't fix the years I lost. But it was justice, real, tangible justice, and for once the adults responsible were the ones facing consequences. When court adjourned, Dad glanced at me for the first time. There was no apology in his eyes. No guilt. Just blame, like I was the one who destroyed his life. That look hurt more than I wanted to admit. But then I felt a hand slip into mine, my mom's. On my other side, Lena placed her hand on my shoulder. I was not that abandoned girl in a mall anymore. I was not invisible. I was not alone. Life after the sentencing didn't immediately become easy. Healing is not a switch someone can flip. It's slow, messy, and uncomfortable. But for the first time, healing felt possible. Living with my mom became a kind of quiet sanctuary. She cooked with me. She let me decorate my new room however I wanted. She listened when I needed to talk and gave me space when I didn't. We'd go on evening walks and talk about everything from school to books to the future. She told me she wished she could rewind time and fight harder for me. I told her she didn't need to. I was here now. Some nights I lay awake thinking about Dad, the version of him I used to love, not the man he became. I grieved him. I grieved the childhood I should have had. I grieved the family I dreamed of. But grief is not weakness. It is a sign of healing. A sign I was finally accepting my truth instead of running from it. Lena became a huge part of my life again. She took me to brunch, taught me how to knit, told me stories about my mom's childhood. She filled gaps in my past that Dad had hidden from me. She reminded me I came from a line of strong women, women who survived their own storms. Getting to know them, the real them, felt like slowly reclaiming the parts of myself I'd lost. I started therapy using the compensation money. At first, I wasn't sure it would help, but the more I talked, the more I realized how deeply Dad's behavior had shaped me. I had spent years believing my needs were burdens, that speaking up was selfish, that love had to be earned. Therapy taught me none of that was true. Painfully slowly, I started to believe I deserved better. Do I miss my father sometimes? Or maybe I miss the version of him I thought existed. But I'm not waiting for that man to come back. He never existed in the first place, not the way I imagined. I'm moving forward, with my mom, with Lena, with the truth, with a version of myself I'm finally starting to recognize and even like. What happened to me will never fully disappear, but it no longer controls me. I survived abandonment. I survived betrayal. I survived being unseen. And now I'm choosing my own future. A future where I'm safe, a future where I'm loved, a future where I matter.